Welcome to the Stephen Mansfield Podcast.
Hey there, welcome to the Stephen Mansfield Podcast. Delighted that you are with me. I want to spend this whole podcast talking to you about the good news of where we are right now in the American economy and getting on the other side of COVID. As you probably all know, Mr. Biden made a speech this last week, and he said that he'd like to target the 4th of July this summer as a time for the nation to pretty much be on the other side of COVID. The majority of Americans vaccinated, economies opened, lifting restrictions, all of that kind of governmental stuff. Well, whatever validity there is in all of that, at least it gives you some sense that it's possible that we could be on the other side, according to our governmental experts. It's possible we could be on the other side by July the 4th. That's exciting news. Now, let me tell you some other good news. I think that's going to be fairly shocking here before I'm done. One of the great truths is that the millennials are entering their prime and they are stepping heavily into the economy. Very, very good news. I'm going to explore that in another podcast, but let me assure you that this gigantic generation had a rough start because of the economic situations, political situations, but they're stepping up. They're being entrepreneurs. They want to reclaim lost ground. They're going to be a powerful engine. Number two, Mr. Biden learned from the experience of Mr. Obama in 2009 that the best thing to do politically, the best thing to do governmentally when it comes to an economic downturn, you remember the Great Recession of 2008 is what we're talking about here. In 2009, though, they learned, quote unquote, let it rip. Do whatever it takes to get the economy humming, and the politics will follow. The politics will work in your favor. So this is the philosophy of the Biden administration. I don't have to say this every time I mention the Biden administration. I'm not aligned with them on a huge number of issues. But letting the economy roar and getting out of the way and stopping socialist restrictions is the way to go. They learned that. They're on it. And I think it's going to mean good things. And by the way, the post-pandemic America could really roar. I'm going to give you some statistics right now that will show you that this is true. I want you to consider the following. Some of it you may not understand, but a lot of it's going to be inspiring to you. Rising equity markets during COVID added $4.9 trillion to household assets in the fourth quarter of last year. And rising real estate values added around $900 billion. Listen to this. Balances in cash, checking accounts, and savings deposits rose by a combined $642.7 billion in the fourth quarter of last year to a record $14.1 trillion. Unbelievable. Do you see what's happening here? Because certain economic forces were in place, even while people were staying home, even while there was a shutdown, most Americans, most of these systems caused tremendous prosperity. Listen to this. Household wealth rose $12 trillion from the year earlier period, from a year before. And consumers, listen to this. Consumers paid off a record $118.3 billion in credit card debt. I'm going to say that again because I stumbled over my words. Consumers paid off a record $118.3 billion in credit card debt. Now, these statistics indicate that you have an economic engine going in America where the average American has more wealth, their property's worth more, they've paid off credit card debt, they're not wasting money on interest, the markets have done better, there's more wealth in equity markets, there's more wealth in real estate. There are larger balances in cash, checking accounts, and savings deposits. All of that rose by $642 billion in the fourth quarter of last year. I'm not saying it's Pollyanna-ish. I'm not saying we're just got no problems. But if we get on top of this pandemic like we think we're going to, there's great money to be spent. Many experts are saying that we really are going to get on top of it, and that there's a potential here for a tremendous prosperity in America. New York Times senior economics correspondent Neil Irwin writes that after tracking decades of gloomy trends, he has now been able to list, and you should read this in the New York Times, 17 reasons to let the economic optimism begin. I mean, it's pretty exciting. He says that the economy is poised for roaring growth. This is the New York Times, by the way. This is not the Wall Street Journal. This is not some over-optimistic, economic newsletter. He says, this is the New York Times senior economics correspondent, Neil Irwin. He says roaring growth is possible, and he lists in this article 17 reasons to let the economic optimism begin. Pretty stunning. And the other article I want you to read is by Reuters, the Thursday, March 11th edition of Reuters. U.S. households ended 2020 with record $130.2 trillion in wealth, Fed says. That's the title. Let me read it again. U.S. households ended 2020 with record $130.2 trillion in wealth, Fed says, Fed says. Look up that article. These are, I will list them in the show notes. These are actual stats of how well our economy is doing. So there have been deaths. We grieve them. We grieve them. There has been economic loss. There are people out of jobs. There are people hurting. I understand. I care. The solution for all but the deaths and the griefs and the troubled relationships as a result of the pandemic, the economic solutions are within our hands. Tremendous wealth, tremendous possibility. Americans have done amazing things. They apparently have sat at home and paid off their credit card debt, and they've not been out taking vacations they couldn't have afforded and buying stuff they didn't need. You understand what I'm saying? This is what these trends show. So get these articles, read these stats, listen to this podcast again, jot them down. Some pretty amazing things are happening. And if we get past the pandemic restrictions, I don't just mean the governmental restrictions, but the actual threat of this pandemic because of vaccinations and other things that are happening, the summer months coming, the experts are telling us, makes it harder for the pandemic to spread, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Herd immunity's kicking in. Listen, we may be heading into a second half of the year that is an explosion of the American and, to some extent, the global economy. We could see some great days ahead. Now, I'm a guy who believes in preparing for trouble. I'm a guy who believes in having some cash laid aside, having food laid aside, always being ready for trouble, being ready for that hurricane or that earthquake or that storm or that terrorist action or whatever. I'm a guy who lives half the year in downtown Nashville. On Christmas morning this last year, as you know, we had a horribly destructive domestic terrorist bomb. Anything can happen. Be ready. Be out of debt. Have cash on hand. Have some extra food. Have some tools. Have some things you need if the power goes out. You know, it's just the grandma strategy I've mentioned before. So keep doing that stuff. And God knows I'm not saying I've had a revelation in the heavens about what's coming next. But here's the good news. The economic indicators are really stunningly good. If we can hit herd immunity, if we can get into the summer months where the heat and the sunshine apparently slow this thing quite a bit, if we can get everybody vaccinated, if we can get past this season in the next 3-4 months, we may be looking at some good days. Let's work for it. Let's pray for it, because we may be seeing a flowering of the American economy and a restoration beyond what's been lost.
Stephen Mansfield is a New York Times best-selling author, a popular speaker, and a frequent faith and culture commentator on Fox and CNN. His groundbreaking books on faith and society include The Faith of George W. Bush, The Search for God in Guinness, Mansfield's Book of Manly Men, and Lincoln's Battle with God. Learn more at stephenmansfield.tv.